Okay, good morning everybody. Welcome. Thank you for joining us on this beautiful morning. The shul made also copies of the whole mimer, if anybody wants. You could still use yesterday's copies, but you have the whole thing stapled. And it's just if you're taking it home, gesundheit, just bring it back, because it's not so many. So if you want to take it, fine, just when you come back for the shir, just bring it. Or you can leave it here and we'll leave it in the stender. Okay, so we began yesterday the mimer Ner Chanukah Tofresh Mem Gimel. So Shabbos Chanukah, December 1882, presented by the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was born Tofresh Chaf Aleph and passed away Tofresh Pei. He was a grandson of his father was the Rebbe Maharash, who was the son of the Tzemach Tzedek, who was the grandson of the Balatanya. The Rebbe Rashab was born Chaf Cheshvan Tofresh Chaf Aleph, 1860, and passed away Beis Nisan Tofresh Pei, 1920, in Rostov at the Dan River. So this is Tofresh Mem Gimel, which is actually the year his father passed away, 1882, Yud Gimel Tishrei, and Shabbos Chanukah, he said this mimer, which explores some of the fundamental ideas in Torah Chassidus about Achdus Hashem, the fact that we're always living in infinite oneness and love. So we began the opening of the mimer, the introduction, and then the question. We're up to page Lamed Zayin, right? Page Lamed Zayin in your copies, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines from the top. Eich Omer Deloi Shanisi Klal, Acha Inyanhu. So let's just capture the main, after the whole introduction about Chanukah, that it's the only mitzvah that we see, that the mitzvah, the Chazal made the mitzvah, it should be connected to the public domain, Rishus HaRabim. But you don't have that in any other, if I'm not mistaken, any other of the 613 mitzvahs Minat Torah, or 7 mitzvahs D'Rabbanan, a mitzvah that it has to be in Rishus HaRabim. On the contrary, Para Aduma, it says, a mitzvah Hanas Bachutz. It's not done in the Beis HaMikdash, it's done outside. They went to the Har HaMishcha, they went to Har HaZeis, and they did Para Aduma over there. So it was outside from the Beis HaMikdash, but not Rishus HaRabim. Even things where you want to publicize the miracle, like Purim, they wanted to publicize the miracle. Pesach, you want to publicize the miracle, but it's all publicized within the community, the house, and the shul, etc. There's no mitzvah to read the Megillah outdoors. The only exception is Chanukah. Al Pesach Beisay Mibachutz, and especially according to Tosfos, that it has to be inside the Rishus HaRabim. And even according to Rashi, the focus is not just the house. Somebody asked me, there is a mitzvah like that, and that is, before Yitzias Mitzrayim, they had to put blood on the door of the house. But they can ask better, the mitzvah of mezuzah. Mitzvah of mezuzah is also on the door of the house outside. So the answer is over there, it's a chayvas habayis. It's a din in the house. Yeah, you do it on the outside door of the house. Here, it's also l'chayra habayis. But the focus has to be, even according to Rashi in the Chatzer, Persumi Nissa, and according to this is in Rishus HaRabim. So, after the longer introduction, the main question that was explored in this mimer, which is going to be the theme of the mimer, is the Nikud of Achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem. And the question here is a very fundamental question. When you say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, what does it mean? There's the classic interpretation in the Rishonim, and then there's the way it's explained, especially through the Chachmei HaKabbalah of Chassidus. It's not a contradiction, it's just, I would say, a deeper layer of it. You could say Hashem Echad is about Hashem. There's one God, there's not many gods. In contrast to polytheism, where there's many gods, the God of the wind, and the God of the water, and the God of the sun, and the God of the moon, and who knows how many gods. There's one. He created the whole world, he's the balabas of the whole world, which is already was the revolution called monotheism, Emunas HaYichud, that Avram Avinu fought for, Vayikra Sham B'Shem Hashem Kei Lo'elam. That's Hashem. That itself is not a small idea, because it means the world has achdus, It means the world is governed by a singular reality. It means there's a moral law that encompasses the whole universe. It's not, my God versus your God, the way they used to understand it in what's called polytheism, the idea of many gods. There's one God, Hashem Echad. That's why there's universal laws of nature and there's universal laws of morality. We call them Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach. Why the universal laws of morality? Shoifech dama Adam, ba'Adam dama yishafach, b'tzelem Elokim asas Adam, right? Respect for human life, respect for human property, respect for animals, Eva min achai, the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nai Noach, respect for marriage. Well, who says? The law of the jungle? There's no law in the jungle. Whoever is stronger wins. So I'm just explaining to you historically how important this idea was. Today we take it for granted. But thousands of years ago, you can't take this idea for granted. There's universal laws of nature, which is also a pella. Where does that come from? Why does all nature? Who made nature listen? You can't get a classroom to be quiet, right? And here you have billions and trillions of forces working in synchronization, and therefore there's universal laws of morality. So it's Avraham Avinu's one of his big ideas. There's Hashem Echad on another level, the Rambam explains, and others. Hashem Echad, that Hashem is not made up of pieces. A guf is one body, but it's a composite. It's called murkav. In Jewish philosophy, it's called murkav. It's like a puzzle. Everything is a puzzle. Everything is made up of many components that come together. So it's one, but it's not really one. It's not a transcendent oneness. But Hashem, the Creator, is infinite. It's not made up of pieces. He has an arm, and he has a leg, and he has a head, and he has eyes, and he has cells, and they all come together. It's a type of achdus that we don't have in our world, because by us, when we say one community, one house, one person, it's made up of many pieces. That's what Hashem Echad is. Which the only way why the Creator doesn't need a creator, because if the Creator is made up of pieces, he also needs a creator. Yeah, makes sense. Came the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov wasn't the first one already. I saw the first time in the Shalah. Shalah lived 100 years before the Baal Shem Tov. He was one of the greatest Mekubalim and Poiskim. The Shalah was the Rav of Prague, Frankfurt, Yerushalayim. He's buried in Tveria near the Rambam. You heard of the Shalah, Rabbeinu Yeshaya Horowitz. He lived in the 16th, 17th century. Shnei Luchas Habris. He wrote a sefer called Shnei Luchas Habris, Shalah. And he writes over there that Hashem Echad means not there's one God, or Hashem is made up, is one Metzias. He's not composite of many details. But Hashem Echad means Hashem is Yachid and Meyuchad. He's the only one. Not that there is one God somewhere and not two gods. Not that this God is not made up of pieces. But Hashem Echad is that Hashem is the only Metzias. When Moshe said, Ein Oid Mulvada, he meant Kipshuta, Ein Oid Mulvada. The Baal Shem Tov turned this into the key, or one of the key yesodis of Teres Achsidus, that Achdus Hashem doesn't mean there is a God. There is a God. It means that the definition, when you say Hashem, that Hashem equals Echad. It's one reality. And Ein Oid, there's nothing outside of that reality. It's the only reality. What does that mean? It's the only reality. So I don't exist. So I'm God. So who's God now? Your wife is God, your mother-in-law is God, you're God. What does it mean? He's the only reality. Is there a world? Is there no world? How are you supposed to understand this? So you could say words, Einoid Mulvadai, Sedachal, Tzevelavolim, Einoid Mulvadai. And a Jew feels it, a Jew senses it, there's an Amunah Pshuta. But how could one live with it? In simple words, as I said yesterday, one has to give. Either I don't exist and you don't exist and the world doesn't exist. Or it exists, but maybe it's fake. As somebody said, fake news, that's fake news. And even the fact that we think it's fake news is also fake news, which is still a problem because perception of fake news is also something, right? A dream is also a reality, it's just a dream. Or you say, Is there something off in the Achdus? Don't say he's the only reality. You could say he created everything. Fine, I understand Hashem created everything. Doesn't mean it's the only reality. How real is the world? How fake is the world? That's the question that's being raised. What's the Havana? In the Isis of this mimer, we say, Ani Hashem lo shanisi. It's a pasuk in Malachi, but that itself has different interpretations. You can say, I haven't changed means I didn't get weaker over the years. God says, I don't go with the fads, right? Today this is in style, tomorrow something else is in style. Ani Hashem lo shanisi. Nobody killed me, I don't die. Chai lad v'kayim lenetzach. But again, the Chachmei HaKabbalah and Chassidus teach lo shanisi deeper, just like Hashem echad. Lo shanisi means pre-creation to post-creation. Atu kaidem shenivra elam, atu lacha shenivra elam. Again, that also has two interpretations. One is you were here before and you're still here. We shouldn't think that once the world was created, you disappeared. You went on vacation. Atu lacha shenivra elam. You were here then, you're here now, you're eternal. Balatanya teaches atu kaidem shenivra elam, atu lacha shenivra elam, atu hu. It's the same who, the same state of reality. Pre-creation is post-creation. In other words, just like pre-creation, there's Hashem echad kipshute, einoid mulvade, there's no world, pre-creation. So atuhu, the same reality is lachas shenivra elam. We're still living in infinite oneness, but there's no we. So something is missing. So you can say that's how it is. Okay, if that's how it is, so fine, we can end the conversation. I can relate to it. What does that mean for me? Am I real? Am I not real? Are my emotions real? Are my struggles real? Is my pain real? Is my darkness real? Even in my avodas Hashem, is my avodas Hashem real? Does it mean anything? Is identity a real thing? Is identity a fake thing? In Yiddish, sometimes people say, "Bist du garnished?" You ever had the schus of anybody telling that to you? Bist du garnished? Rabbi Elkam was once teaching us Chassidus, he was talking about this. He said in a shtetl, there was a shtetl in Russia, and a guy owed somebody else a lot of money. So he took him to the Rav to get back his money. So this Yid says, I don't understand. He's a chassid. He knows the einoid mulvadai. The money doesn't exist. The loan doesn't exist. I don't owe him any money. I don't exist. He doesn't exist. Right? I'm a chayu. When you owe somebody money, suddenly einoid mulvadai. Why not? Very good way to get out of your debts. So the Rav said, he said in Yiddish, Maskim, lamer nemen dem garnished, a weglegen auf a garnished, a reingeben a paar garnished, und alles wird sein garnished. Let's take this thing that doesn't exist, put him down on something that doesn't exist, give him a few nothings, he meant a few schmitz, and a few klep, and everything will be nothing. You know, it's nice to say, tachlis, tell the bank that you don't exist, right? And he doesn't only say, he says, it's not just a question, stam. I don't feel this way. One of the yisaidus in Pnimi Yisatayr is that there's different worlds. We spoke about 4 worlds, Atzilus, B'ri, Yitzir, Asiyah. And what's that different worlds? He says, in Atzilus, there's Gili Elikus, godliness is revealed. B'ri is less, Yitzir is less. Asiyah is a Choshech Kafel Chupel, it's complete darkness. You can't say there was no change. so everything is a contradiction here. You say there's achdus, there's no achdus, there is a difference. Is there a difference between people? Is there a difference between worlds? You would think that the conclusion has to be, if you wanted to approach this from a logical perspective, one of them is not so real. Either you're not so real, right? Or the Hashem Echad has to be reinterpreted. What this mimer is going to explain, and this is a very fundamental idea to understand, is that both are 100% real. When it says B'reishis bara l'kimus hashmayim v'sa'aretz, it's not a joke. It's not a fictional story. It's real. Creation is real, and the purpose of creation is real, and a person is real, and reality is real. Reality is real. That's brilliant.
So you're saying there is no competition between two realities.
Yeah. On the other hand, when you say Einaid Mulvade, Ani Hashem, it's as real as it gets. Okay, so you just want to say, fine, paradox. I don't have what to say. You could always say that. You could say, God does paradoxes. The problem is when you say that, it doesn't leave us with anything. Fine, I believe you. I trust you. Okay, I don't know. It's not relatable. It's not something I can internalize. Because we are structured people. We have minds. We have hearts. We have identities to some degree. So this mimer goes through if I could say, an evolutionary process in this explanation. He starts off with one nekuda in chapter 2. In chapter 2, that gets challenged and goes yet to a deeper place. That gets challenged and goes to a deeper place. All are true, but it's just different, as we'll see, different layers of existence. I once heard from Rabbi Khan, he said, in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah, the second section of Tanya, the Balatanya, in chapter 3, asks a question, and that which is going to be addressed later. And that is that based on the fact that the whole world is essentially an expression of Hashem's energy, so the world should have been batel b'metzius. You shouldn't feel any separate existence from Hashem. And he compares it to the light of the sun in the solar core. When the light is in the solar core, there's no separate reality of the sun and light of the sun. That's how he finishes the chapter, with a question. Why is it that we feel the world as a separate reality? So the Biel gave us a shir. He said that they used to say that you shouldn't go to sleep with a mimer nevuchim. A mimer nevuchim is the philosophical work of the Rambam, a guide to the perplexed. Why? Because you may fall asleep after the question. The Rambam over there questions everything, right? Because he wants to prove Yiddishkeit from a logical point of view. You may fall asleep after the question before you got to that. And you know how people are with a book, especially if it's a hard book. You fall asleep after the question. He says, the whole night, you're going to live with the question. It's not good. You shouldn't go to sleep with a mimer nevuchim. That's what they use. It's an alter vert. So he says he doesn't understand how does the Alter Rebbe finish a whole Perek in Shara Yichud Ve'emunah with a question until you get to the next Perek. It could be a week, could be 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So he said Chassidim used to say, with this shaila, it's nicht gefährlich if you fall asleep. This question, how is it that the world feels itself like a separate metzius? It's nicht gefährlich if you sleep. If you dream this question, how is it that you feel separate? He says, it's good to leave that question. That's not a question that, it's good to leave it off with that question. Huh? Am geht schlafen mit der Scheile, für was fühl ich sich wie ein Metzies? Nicht gefährlich. Verstehst du nicht? Huh? Acha inyan hu. The Indian is the hine kol hashinuyim hanal hu rak lagabe hamakablim. All the changes we spoke about are real relative to the recipients, meaning to those who are makabel, who receive the energy. The olam ha'atzilis, if you talk about the world of Atzilis of nation, is dachicha olam v'asviris l'chein yichel makabel yoseh gili elikus. Because the world and the spheres are the characteristics of the world, the energies of the world, are refined, so they could receive a deeper, their antennas are more refined, they could receive a deeper energy, they're receptive to Gili Elikus, to revelation of the divine. Olam habriya loines dachich kolkach. Briya, relative to Atzilus, is not so mezuchich, it's not so transparent, it's not so refined. Can't receive such a profound flow of revealed godliness. The same is true with Yitzir is less and Asiyah is less. Our world, the physical world, because it's still not refined, at least not completely. So therefore the whole reality of a likus is counterintuitive to our world. You have to debate it, it's a chiddush, you have to discuss it, right? You could get the Nobel Prize as an atheist and as an agnostic. The world doesn't easily and in a revealed fashion bespeak the presence of Hashem and Elikus. So this is all relative to the mekablim, those who experience it, you have to be able to be open to perceive something. You have to be able to be open to perceive something. If I'm not open, if I don't have if I didn't go through the work, the refinement, we all know in our lives, right? Somebody could tell you the deepest truths about your life. And these truths may create a whole new future for you. But if I didn't do the work to be open to it, it's often a bracha levatala. Sometimes it takes 20 years for the person to come back and hear the same words and like, oh, where was I? It's not that the information wasn't there. It's not that you didn't hear the information. It's that you have to be a keli for things. You have to be a keli. It could rain and rain and rain a whole day. Hashem could send rain a whole day. But if I didn't plow and I didn't plant a seed, nothing is going to grow. You'll say, why not? Because rain, yeah, but you have to be fertile. If the earth wasn't plowed, it's not fertile, it's infertile. So, every person receives things based on their antennas, based on their kalim, based on their vessels, what they're shaykh to receive. And that has to do with your zichuch, how refined you are, to be able to perceive what the reality of a situation is. Two people could look at the same thing, but perceive a completely different level of reality, not based on what the reality is, based on the instruments I'm using to define reality, based on how open I am, how refined I am, what tools do I use. It's true in every area of life. There's no area of life it's not true.
The Webb telescope.
Huh? The Webb telescope.
All of a sudden, is it?
A whole different world. Yeah. They just sent out a few months ago, it's called the James Webb telescope. For the first time in history, it brought back pictures. It recorded pictures from 4.6 billion light years away. That's unbelievable. 4.6 billion galaxies and stars from 4.6 billion light years away. That's beyond huh? Pittsburgh and a little further. The gas station after Pittsburgh. Yeah. A light year is not a year of 365 days. Light travels 186,000 miles per second. So how much does light travel in an hour? It's a big number. And a day, and a month, and how much does light travel in a year? Now go 4.6, not million years, but billion years of light years. Not our years, 365 days. You understand the distance from here to the sun is 8 minutes. It takes light to travel from the sun to here, to earth, 8 minutes. The sun that we're seeing, we see 8 minutes later. We don't see the sun. What?
A long time ago in a very distant galaxy.
Yes, it's been a long time ago. So, no, you're just bringing out the telescope, right? It's not that the galaxies were created in 2022. The galaxies weren't created in 2022. We have the keli to be able to perceive it. And what they realized is that what we're seeing now is a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of the universe. It puts things in perspective at least a little bit. So it's always based on the keli. Whatever that keli is, we talk about physicality, talking about spirituality. You say, is there gilia lakus or not? Atzilus Bri Yitzir Asiyah says the difference is in the keli, in the container, in the antennas that exist in that reality, what you're capable of perceiving. What eyes you have, what instruments you use. Aval ein soif hu nimtza lamata kamay lamayla mamish. But the ein soif, which means the infinite one, Hashem, is present below as above, mamish. Not that there's a difference. It's mamish, kamay like it says in Tehillim, kachashecha ka'ira. It says, Gam choshech, in Tehillim kuf lametes, Gam choshech layachshech memeka, v'layla kayoim yor kachashecha ka'ira. Like darkness is like light. What does it mean? The darkness doesn't eclipse you. Why doesn't it eclipse you? When it's dark, I can't see. But no darkness eclipses you. Shonimtza b'makam ha'choshech kamay b'makam ha'or. In a place that we call darkness, we're calling it darkness, because I may not have the container, the antennas, to be able to perceive the Ein Sof there. But Mitzad the Ein Sof is fully present there. The darkness, the concealment doesn't block doesn't eclipse before him. And explains what this means. It's not just a statement. The hine is sibas achoshech vehelam lamata. Sheyeh mitzias hayesh nizbar lel shemitzat shem elikim shemayla mamasrat sheyuchalis mitzias hayesh kanal. The whole reason that there is a concealment, which allows there to be a mitzias of yesh. What's a mitzias of yesh? A mitzias that feels separate and independent, not divine, we explained, is because of Shem Elikim. Shemesh u'magen Hashem Elikim. The name of Elikim conceals, and it allows that even though the Boire is creating everything, but the Nivra, that which is created, should feel its own ego, its own separate reality, as a separate reality. So without that symptom, if there was no filter, if there was no mugging on the Shemesh, if there was no concealment, if there was no Shem Elikim, if Hashem didn't want a Shem Elikim, so what would happen? There would be no Metzias of a Yesh, there would be no separate Metzias, there would be no darkness, because the light wouldn't be concealed. So if the doors of perception were cleansed, and there was no filter, no concealment, no contraction, no restriction, everything would appear as is, which is Ein Sof, infinite, all one. But because there is Shem Elikim, like we said, Shemesh u'Magin, what the Magin is for the Shemesh, what the sheath is for the sun, Elikim is for Hashem. So therefore the energy could be concealed and eclipsed. And now you have a world of Atzilus, you have a world of Bria, you have a world of Yitzir, you have a world of Asiyah. And in each world itself you have endless states of consciousness based on how powerful the Tzimtzum was. And in our world itself, you have endless states of consciousness. You can't compare. Every person has their own consciousness, their own prism through which they see the world. And the question is, how much the darkness or the concealment has affected me, has affected my vision. That depends who I am, where I am, how much I work on myself, etc. That's all Shem Elikim. V'hinei hatzimtzum v'ahesteru legabeinu. This concealment, this tzimtzum, is legabeinu, meaning we define it as such. Sheyeh mitzias hayesh. And there was a reason for it. There should be a mitzias called a yesh. A mitzias yesh means something. Yesh means something, an existence that perceives itself as outside of Hashem. Aval legabe ein sof, atzmusoi umuhusoi. But if you're talking from the vantage point, kavayachal, from the perspective, legabe ein sof, Hashem himself, einu shayich shum tzimtzum v'hester chas v'shalom. No tzimtzum and hester creates a real concealment. Come on, Shekhasav, the pasuk says, Yirmiyah, es hashamayim v'sa'aretz ani mole. I fill heaven and earth. And when you say fill, it means like you say a cup is full. It means there's no space devoid of it. It's not like there's a part of earth where I'm gone. So shamayim v'sa'aretz ani mole. Every crevice, every nook, every element is filled with me. Uksiv, Yeshaya Hanavi says, we say it in the morning in davening, every morning before Kriya Shema and in Kedusha, Maloi Chala Aretz Kavayda. The whole earth, even the earth, doesn't mean only the earth, even the earth is filled with Kavayda. You'll say, what do you mean? I don't see, I'm sorry, I don't see it. When it says Shema V'Zor, it's Ani Mole. Ani Mole. Ani Mole, right? Ani V'Av Siyoid. I fill it. Well, I'm here. I'm sitting here. Either you're sitting here, we can't both sit in the same seat. So he says, something outside of you can block you. Something can't eclipse itself. The fascinating how it's expressed in halach. Shulchan Aruch Erechaim speaks about covering your head during davening. So what happens if I don't have a yarmulke? So what do? I take my hand. I have a gewaldik idea, right? I take my hand. I cover my head. Azoi, gewaldik. Yeah. He says, no, it's not kisi. Why not? My head is covered. He said, because the head and the hand is one guf. Ein etzem master al etzem. You can't cover you. Why can't you cover you? Because you are you. Because you is not covering you, because that's also you. If your hand could cover my head. If you take your hand, right, or I take a shmata, a yarmulke, it could be a shmata. I take a towel, I put it over. That's a kisui. Excuse me. It's a fascinating halacha. Since the guf is considered one, it's a singular organism. So even though physically my head is covered, practically, if it rains, it's going on my hand, not on my head. You can ask, what do you mean? It is covering. It's Pashut covering it. What's the difference if I put a hat? I put my hat on it. Halach, it's not considered a kisui. You could put your jacket on. You could put somebody else's hand, yeah. Because he says, Ein etzem master aletzem. Since the hand and the head are one, so you can't cover you because the you that's covering the you is also you. So it's not a real cover. So he applies this, like every halacha, it has a source in ruchnius. The whole concept of hester could only be legabi somebody else. Right? I'll give you another example. I don't know if it's more pashut than this example, but if somebody's teaching a class, if you're teaching a class, let's say to very young children, and you know it's a very deep concept, but you know you can't say everything you're thinking because nobody's going to know what you're talking about. So you only give them the outer layer. Somebody's touching Mishnayos, somebody's teaching Mishnayos or Pasuk Chumash. You happen to know many, many layers of depth in this Mishnah. But you have to basically give only an outer layer. So you're concealing the rest of it, right? But it's not a concealment for you, because you're the one concealing it. It's not like, for the child it's a concealment. Why is for the child a concealment? Because he's a zulus, somebody outside of you. But the one who's creating the concealment, that's not a real concealment. Because the eye, who is behind this blockage, right? So the blockage is also the eye, so it's not concealing the eye. So that superficial class is not superficial for the teacher, because within the superficiality he sees everything. You understand what I'm saying? Oh, that's what he says. 1 second, good, 1 second. The einemail mashiyasam adar veshum the shein etzem master aletzem. Ulamayla hare ein lecha davar shechutz mimeno. It's not like the Hester, there's Hashem, and then Elikim comes in and says, God, I'm going to block you. What's Elikim? Yeah. Havaya Elikim kol echad. Hashem hu Elikim. What's that Hashem hu Elikim? It's not just two names. In English they say the Lord is God. Okay, thank you. Yankel is Yankel, yeah. Sprinze is Sprinze. Hashem hu Elikim. Hashem hu Elikim is a big Kiddush. Elikim is Hester. Elikim is Midas HaTzimtzum. Yud Kei Vav Kei is Gilui, revelation. To say Hashem hu Elikim, Hashem and Elikim are one, you're saying something. You're not just saying two names in English, and then you're saying, Chaim and Yankel are the same person. He has two names. By the Bris, they gave him two names. When you see the English translations, you sometimes don't understand. The Lord is God. God is the Lord. I don't know if you ever read the English translations. Fine, so God is the Lord. So you have one name, you have another name. I'm talking about the same guy. Okay. They say, why did Yisrei have 7 names? Because he had 7 daughters and he had to marry them off. So after each chasana he went bankrupt, karagel. So he had to change his name. So there's Yisrei and there's Yeser. There's Chayvav. He had 7 names. Every chasana became a new identity. So you say all the 7 names are one. The teichen here is Hashem hu Elikim kol echad ein lecha davar shechutz mimeno. The concealment itself is also elikus. So ein etzem master aletzem. So Elikim is not mastered on Havaya. It's mastered. It's again. It's like my head covering over my head. V'im kein eino shayach sheshum davar yaster el elikus kla. So nothing is really concealing elikus, because that which is concealing is also elikus. V'im kein eino shayach loyma sheshem Elikim yaster el love chas v'shalom. So you can't say that the name of Elikim, Midas HaTzimtzum, creates a real tzimtzum, Legabi Hashem, and it limits his presence or his expression or his manifestation, that in Atzilus or in Brio or in Yitzira or Nasiya, it's less. The Achdus is less. Because there's darkness. Ein etzem master al etzem. What's concealing it? Shem Elokim, the mechanisms of Elokim, that's also divine. Ein lecha davar shechutz mimeno. There's nothing outside. The Hester B'Isaac. Shari Shem Elokim shubchinas malchus. Shem Elokim is associated also with the quality, with the sphere of malchus. Every name of Hashem is associated with a different sphere. Like Kael is chesed, l'moshel. Excuse me. Shem Eka Aleph Hey Yud Hey is Keser. Shin Daled Yud is Yisoid. In Kabbalah and Pardes, they explain every name. So the name Elokim is associated often with Malchus. Sometimes also with Gvura, which is also associated with Malchus. But Elokim is Malchus. Who Elokus? It's not that it's a different name, it's a different energy. You're covering your head through a towel. That's Elokus, that's divine. Umiyuchad be'ein soif b'tachlis hayichud. And when we say it's Elokus, it's completely one with the Ein Sof. V'imkein einay master klal gam legabi ha'adam Hashem havaya mahava olamus. So even relative to the ray of Havaya that's creating the world through Elokim, and Elokim is a tzimtzum, Elokim is a hester, it's concealing it, it's filtering it, it's contracting it, but it's not a hester. But it is. You're saying it created a yesh. He says, yeah, kiyam legabi hamakablim. Legabi the recipient, the one experiencing the flow, the hester is genuine. The hester is real. It's authentic. I don't experience infinite oneness. Avaloi legabi ha'or. Not legabi the or, the light, the energy that comes from Shem Havaya, Hashem's energy. V'imkein lo shanisi gam b'ha'or shemeir me'erin soif. So even the light that comes from Ein Sof, which means the flow of chiyus, of vitality, that creates all the worlds, also lo shanisi. It's not like now, it's compromised, it's filtered, it's finite, it's limited. It's fully present. V'kol sheken legabi atzmos. This is even legabi the Ur that goes to create the worlds. In other words, the Ur that's filtered. Certainly legabi the essence himself, the source. She'ein shayich shum hester. No concealment is applicable. So it depends which side you're looking from. Sometimes, right, you have it, if a teacher is teaching and the sugya, the idea is complicated, he'll give a mashal. He'll tell a story, a parable, right? Why do you give parables? You give parables because the idea itself is very abstract. So you give a parable, it illustrates it, right? It brings it down, it's a nice story. So when people hear the parable, they don't know where you're going because they don't know the concept. Hopefully through the parable, they'll understand the concept. So, you got it. Very good. You understand why I'm giving this parable? Right. If you would know right away where the parable is going, it's not a good parable. The concept was abstract. So the parable is like, let's tell a story. And then hopefully you can go back from the mashal to the nimshal. Right? In Medrash you always have mashal lama dava daima. What do you need mashal? Don't give me mashalim. I don't need mashalim. It says that Shlomo Melech vayidaber shloishus alafim mashalim malachim. It says he had 3,000 metaphors. The Maggid says, the Maggid of Mezrich says, the world learns he had 3,000 stories in his repertoire. Everybody has what's called a filing cabinet of stories, right? Yeah, so everybody knows that Jews have 400 jokes, right? 100 of them are about your wife or your husband, another 100 about rabbis and doctors and lawyers, right? Another 100 about religion, another 100 about food. Shlomo Melech la'avlet shloishus alafim mashal. He had 3,000 gevaldik. He had 3,000 stories that you can't, the Maggid says, shloishus alafim mashal means something else. It means his ideas were so deep that he needed to give a mashal for the idea. But the mashal, the metaphor, was also too deep, so he needed to give a mashal for the mashal. 3,000 layers in order to bring it down. That's shloishus alafim mashal. So what's the mashal is a blockage. It's supposed to be a blockage. If the mashal is not a blockage for the idea, it's not a good mashal. The mashal doesn't give you access to the depth. That's why you can open yourself up to it, right? You see with people, I speak a lot, so I know this. You can say ideas. You tell a story, everything changes. What happened? The whole story is here to give out the idea. I'm not interested in the story. But that's what it is. Why? In communication, right? Storytelling is very powerful. What does a story do? A story takes it away from the original intensity and it brings it into a new reality. And over there, people can open up. First of all, you're not talking about them. You're talking about somebody else. So that's for sure good. So there's no defenses. If you're telling somebody about them, chas v'shalom, right? Adkan. But you're telling me a story about Ploini Almoini who lived the Chveizven, yeah, Gesundheit. And then after that, we'll go back. Nasan Anavi, yeah. With the sheep, yeah. Nasan Anavi with David HaMelech. Over there, it's actually much deeper. But okay, that's a whole separate inyan. That he had to paskin. He had to paskin his own din. L'tin din v'cheshben. Over there, there's a whole shtickle in L'kutei Maran from the Baal Shem Tov about this. That you have to give your verdict. You have to be the one to give your own verdict. But yeah, so by definition, if a person is telling the story, the mashal, the point is that in the mashal you don't see right away the nimshal. It's a good cover-up because the nimshal is too deep. But that's only from the perspective of the one hearing the mashal. The one saying the mashal, he's not going to say, oh, my idea was just concealed because I said a mashal. For you, it's not a concealment. Why not? Because the author of the nimshal is also the author of the mashal. From the one who doesn't know the nimshal, he hears the mashal. It's a process. The mashal only gives you an outer layer, and you have to work to get to the deeper layer. For the one saying the mashal, the author of the nimshal and the mashal is just an expression of the nimshal in a way that it's filtered. The filter is not a genuine filter, it's not a genuine concealment from the perspective of the one communicating, only from the one who's experiencing the communication from the outside. So he's saying there's two ways of defining the world. Legabi, the mekablim, it's not a stira. There's takatzilas, briya, yitzira, asiya. Depends on how Shem Elokim affects you. And essentially, if you see how he puts it here, in different oisias, and this is what we explained at length in V'yadaita and the last mimer Torah Vayera, V'yadaita Moskva, about the tzimtzum. The Arizal explained that there was a tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is Elokim, Shem Elokim is tzimtzum. What does tzimtzum mean? The Arizal says, this is how Eitz Chaim begins. When Hashem wanted to create the world, Haya Oirein Soif Mamale Kol Makam Achalol V'lo Haya Makam Lamidus Oilamus. Oirein Soif filled the entire space of what would be the world, and there was no space for the worlds. When he says space, he doesn't only mean physical space. There was no space b'chlal, there was no time, there was no space. Makam, you'll say, for example, somebody will say a svara in yeshiva, right? And you'll say in Yiddish, Die svara hat kein art nicht. Ein laze makam, shtuyot. What does it mean, ein laze makam? Your svara has no place. What do you mean? And my svara does have a place. What svaras sit on chairs? You don't have a place in the Beis Medrash. A svara needs a chair. I met a younger man the other day. He learns in Lakewood, Beis Medrash Gavoy already for 30 years. So I asked him if he learns a whole day. So he said, besides learning, he's also on a bezdin of Choshen Mishpat. I said, what are you misasik in? He said, the place is in BMG. I said, what's pshat? He says, if you went to Yisrael for a year and then you come back, or you went a few months for a shidduch, and you want your own place, yeah, you have 8,000 people, whatever the number is, Kanayin Hada, 7,000 people. So there's a bezdin of Choshen Mishpat in Beis Medrash Gavoya in Lakewood to deal with disputes over the places in the Beis Medrash. You had a good place, yeah? You went to get married. You come back 4 months later. Hayala Deinenu. So he's part of a bezdin. He took training and this. Choshen Mishpat. Who gets the chair? It's interesting. No, I didn't know there's such a bezdin. But he was telling me about it. He told me about different cases and how they paskin. It's a serious question. Chazaka, what's called chazaka, what's not chazaka. But that's all people. People need chairs in Beis Medrash. The svara doesn't need a chair. The Gemara needs a shelf, not a chair. Why doesn't a svara need a chair? Because a svara doesn't live in chairs. It doesn't exist in the physical dimensions. So you'll say the svara doesn't have a place. Place doesn't mean it doesn't have a physical place. It means it's not reality. It's stupidity. You say the svara is a shtutz, ein lozem makam. Ein lez a makom. So when the Arizal says lo haya makom lamidas ha'elamis, he doesn't mean only there was no space, because Hashem is big. He filled up everything. He's saying something much deeper. Lo haya makom. The concept of reality outside of Ein Sof was inconceivable. You typhus? You heard what I said. The concept that was inconceivable. Tell me the 2 plus 2. Your child will ask you, how much is 2 plus 2? So you'll answer 2 plus 2 is pink. You can argue with that. If you tell me 2 plus 2 is 5, okay, I could say narishkeiten. Tell me 2 plus 2 is yellow, fine, thank you. Talking about not Ein Sof, pre-Tzimtzum is like saying 2 plus 2 is pink. It's not that I'm wrong. You understand? Sometimes you say something that's wrong. It's wrong, but I understood what you said. 2 plus 2 equals 5. It's wrong. 2 plus 2 equals pink is not wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. Pink and 2, it's different worlds. The Tzimtzum was a revolution. The Tzimtzum was machadish, yeah, that there is a concept not Ein Sof. Ultimately, you and I can exist. So that's what the Arizal said there was a Tzimtzum. So he says here, the Shittas HaBaal Shem Tov, that when you say the Tzimtzum, don't think there was any Tzimtzum in Oir, and certainly not in Atzmos. That's why he says it both. Even in Oir. What's Oir? Oir is the expression of Hashem. The energy that's creating, even there was no filter. Either is Hashem or Elikim. Because the Tzimtzum itself is also Elikos. Shem Elikim is also divine. So therefore, Ein Etzem Master Al Etzem. It's like you blocking you. You can't block you. Why? Because the you that's blocking the you is you. Somebody else, it may serve as a blockage for somebody outside of you. But for you, the instrument, the filter, the tools, whatever the mechanism that's creating the concealment, that is Elikus. So b'meila, the Ein Oid Mulvadai pre-state, pre-creation is the same. Achtos Hashem. You say there's Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, see all these changes. He says, Lagabe, the Mekablim, there's a Hester. And therefore, even in the Oir, even the Oir that comes from Avaya, that Oir is not defined by a filter. It's fully present like it was before the Tzimtzum. So when the Arizal says there had to be a Tzimtzum to create an empty space, it just means for the recipient it looks like an empty space. So what's your question? For the Makabel, yeah. For the Makabel, it's a Hastara. Like he says, there's Atzilus, there's Bri, Yitzir, Asiya, because you're saying if Mitzad Mashpiyah there's taka no Hester, so why Lagabe the Makabel is there a Hester? How is there even a Makabel? Good question. You're saying so there's no Hester taka. So if there's no Hester, right? Even where the Makabel is, there's no Hester. Even in that space where there's an empty space, it's not an empty space. It's Ein Sof. There's nothing outside of the person. You're saying, But you're saying it's not an illusion, and even an illusion is also an illusion. Why is there an illusion? A chalam is a chalam. An illusion is the chaychan illusion. Okay, good. All's good to kashas. So there's one more nekuda here. So even the gabe the ha'ara, there's no hester, and he says certainly the gabe atzmus, there's no hester. So you're asking a good question. So if there's no. The By me there is, but where did the me even emerge? In the mashal I'm giving, there's a teacher, there's a student, they're two separate people. They were two separate people before, now they're still two separate people. So the teacher says a mashal and the student doesn't know what's inside the mashal easily. But here, you're saying it's not a teacher and a student. How did the student even emerge as a separate being to be able to say that this is blocking?
When you said that it was revolutionary, that seems to that it was revolutionary for who?
Right, so obviously that's what he's saying, that the tzimtzum is legabe the mekablim, not legabe the mashpia, not legabe Hashem. So let's see another few lines here. It's late. The be'emes, the line starts legabe atzmus. The be'emes, bazed the koshkin legabe atzmus sheina shayich shum hester. The be'emes, really, bazed dafke nishlam hamachuven. When you say there's no concealment, it doesn't mean that it's fake. It means bazed dafke nishlam hamachuven. This creates the kavana of the creation. The masha'ala b'ritzayna yapashat shiyah olam. The reason he desired there should be worlds, who kadei shiyah na emloich. There should be the gilui of the malchus of Hashem. It's a lashon in Kabbalah, na emloich. Adonai olam Hashem malach, ve'ein melech beloy am, as it says in Sfarim, a melech needs an am. Hashem wanted a relationship. He wanted to be a melech. A melech here means wanted a connection. And you can't have a melech without an am. A melech as a leader. Just like in marriage, you can't have a chassan without a kala. You can't have a kala without a chassan. You say, get married to yourself. There's no such a thing. Ein melech beloya. V'im kein. Ha'yishavus shenasa b'pchinas malchus sheyih metzias hayesh zeu ikir ha'mechuven in esava kadosh baruch hu liyas leidere b'tachtonim dafka. So the creation that happens from Malchus, which allows for the Yesh, this fulfills the Kavana, the objective of creation. It says in Medrash Tanchuma, Parshas Nosai, Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyas leidere b'tachtonim. Hashem wanted to have a dira, a home, a dwelling place in the lowest element of reality. What does it mean, the lowest element? What's it called b'tachtonim? There's no tachtonim. The answer is, in that which is perceived as outside and completely detached, over there should be a connection and a relationship. There should be oneness. So it's precisely in the Elikim, in the Malchus, in the Yesh, that the whole desire of creation is fulfilled. So Malchus is as Ein Sof as the Ein Sof. So it's not a real concealment. What's he adding here? To answer your question. The shaila is, what's pshat concealment? Not that we're saying the concealment is fake. If Hashem is real, Elokim is also real. What we're saying is, the way we define Hester, from Hashem's perspective, it's seen in a different way. What is it seen as? It's just seen as an opportunity for Malchus, for Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu liyas leidere b'tachtonim. So the Hester is redefined as a real absolute separateness to an opportunity to be able to build a relationship. I'll give you an example that I think illustrates it. If you, you're trying to train your child to walk or to drive a bike. So you have, what do they call it? Training wheels. So you can't fall. And then one day you take off the training wheels, and what's the first thing that happens? He falls, right? So you'll say, wow, these parents really don't care about the child. Or you're walking with a child, the infant, and the child is walking beautifully holding your hand, and then you take away your hand, and the child loses its balance and falls. Are you going to say that emotionally the father or the mother now detached from the child? I don't care about you? No. Why? The whole purpose is on the contrary. I want you to be able to walk independently. I want you to be able to drive your own bike. I want you to be able to be the person you're capable of becoming. I want you to be able to learn to walk. I don't want for the rest of your life you're holding Tati's hands, Mommy's hands. The child may not feel that way. The child's like, where are you? You're the worst Tati you ever lived. Why? Because the child is feeling separate. You just let me fall. But you didn't just let him, you let him fall. What you were trying to bring out is, you want him to become stronger. You want him to realize his strength. You want him to realize that he could walk. He'll get up and he'll fall and he'll get up and he'll fall, and then the third and fourth time he'll be able to walk. When somebody has a struggle in life, it's a very sensitive thing he's saying, and you have to know how to say it, because it could be misconstrued as not empathetic, but it's very empathetic. If you have a struggle, what's the definition of a struggle? If you feel the beauty of the struggle, it's not a struggle. MS. What makes a struggle is that it's a struggle. You don't see the beauty of it. But the one who gave you the struggle, if he really loves you, what does he see in the struggle? He just sees in the struggle, soif maisa b'machshavat chila. How you're going to grow from it. What you're going to become of it. But if I would feel that, it's not a struggle. I wouldn't be able to go through. It's like when you ever see the caterpillar morph into a butterfly, right? So they say there was a farmer who was watching the poor butterfly struggling. So what does he do? Or it's like, I once saw a chick trying to come out of the egg. It could take hours and hours, heavily later, for the chick to come out of the egg. So I had this taiva, right? Let me crack the egg. Let me crack the egg and the chick will come out. So the person who had these chicks said, you're going to kill it. Because by trying to crack the egg, 10 hours, it develops the muscles that it needs in order to survive. So you're going to open the egg, so it's going to be struggle-free, and what's going to happen? The chick will die a day later because it didn't develop the muscles it needs to live. But the chick doesn't know this. All the chick knows is, this is a sick egg. I hate this egg. Whoever made this egg, you're not a good mommy. Yeah, I'm not going to do it this way. And it's not a stira, right? Because if the chick would just sit back and say everything is wonderful, it wouldn't be able to become what it has to become. Sometimes you see a person going through something, you can't tell them anything. You can't say that on the other side of the tunnel, it's going to be incredible for you. You can't. First of all, they're not going to be able to relate to it. Second of all, it's not what they need to hear from you. And it can also cause sometimes, wrong impressions and so forth. The person going through the darkness is going through the darkness. But from the perspective, a higher perspective, I don't see darkness. What do I see? I see an opportunity for you to become the person you become. But it's a painful duality, because the person in the darkness will not see it this way. And you have to be able to validate their perspective. You typhus what I'm saying? I once heard from the Lubavitcher Rabbi, he said a moide dikavart. It says in Rashi, Vayisroitzitzu habonim. In Rivka's womb, it was very tumultuous. Yaakov was gravitating to, whenever she went by a beis medrash, whenever she went by Forshay. So Yaakov started to get excited, and when she went by a pagan monastery, Esav started to fabring and get excited. Esav started to say l'chaim in the womb. Everybody knows this Rashi. So Rebbe asked a simple question. In a womb, people don't have bchira. I didn't choose what to do in my mother's womb. They call it today genetic disposition, the genes. So why are you calling Esav a Rasha when already in the womb the Rebbeinu Shalom decided he should gravitate to Avodah Zarah? That's not called free choice. Don't call him a Rasha. We don't call a lioness a Rasha and a sheep a tzadekis. The lion didn't decide to devour a sheep, and the sheep didn't decide to be a lemechel and a shefel. They're genetically that way. You have tightness to the tiger, to the cheetah, what do you want the cheetah to do? To say, no, I'm going to be a chicken today. You want a lion to get up and say, okay, you know what? I made a cheshbon nefesh last night. I'm becoming a puppy. Lions can't do that. Was willst du von them? Yeah? What do you want from Esav? I don't understand. In the womb, he's gravitating to Avodah Zarah. So the addiction didn't come when he was 20 years old. The addiction came in the womb of his mother. So whose fault is that? That's his fault. So he said, "Amoyde de kavart." The struggle with Avodah Zarah is not bad. That's a shlichus. The fact that Esav was gravitating to Avodah Zarah didn't make him a rush. That doesn't make him a bad person. It just puts him in a world where his mission is a different type of mission. It's a mission where he has to struggle against Avodah Zarah. Esav never had a choice to be like Yaakov. Even if Esav would have been a tzaddik, he would have never looked like Yaakov. He would have looked like Esav a tzaddik. It's a different type of tzaddik. You can't choose everything in life. I can't choose to be you. I can choose to take my struggles and be me. Esav's choice was that yes, with his struggles to Avodah Zarah, he would become a powerhouse. Yoidei Etzayid Ish Sada. The Rambam says in Shmeina Prakim, there's Chassid HaMa'ula, there's Kovesh HaSisra, there's two types of people. There's a goody, you all have in a family, we all have in our family, right? There's the boys, they go on the conveyor belt, you know the conveyor belt of the system? You hatch them, you match them, you dispatch them, you don't hear from their principal till the day of graduation of high school, and then you're ready for a shidduch. And then you say, call me back for Vachnacht. And then you have a kid, every day is nach a parsha for 20 years, every day nach a parsha. So Rambam says, a chassid ha'ma'ula, a perfect kid, a gevaldik. And then there's Kovesh HaSisra. It's not better. We often define struggle as evil. Chas v'shalom. The struggle doesn't come from you. The struggle comes from the Rebbeinu Shalom. Person goes through stuff, that didn't come from you. Your bchira is not, I can't be like you. I am in this world. If you went through something as a child, those of you know, you're going to be dealing with it for the rest of your life. Your choice is not to deal with it or not to deal with it. Your choice is how you view it. Do you say my struggle is an invitation for weakness and despair and depression? Or my struggle is an invitation for the chick to break the egg and for the caterpillar to morph into a butterfly and to fly to the heavens. That's the choice. Hester. The Hester is emes. Elokim is not fake. Hashem could reveal, Hashem could conceal. But what do you see in the concealment? When Hashem looks at the concealment of the world, what does he see? It's an opportunity for a relationship. If there's no Hester, there's no Dina B'Tachteinim. Ein Melech B'Loyam. So your separateness from me is not because we're really separate. It's that we could really connect. You have a personality, you have a mitzvah, so we could connect. So Elokim, the way it's registered, the way it's experienced, Mitzad Ein Sof, is an invitation for a relationship. So it's not that the Hester is a sheker. Hashem is not a chas v'shalom, not emes, and Elokim is not emes. If Hashem is emes, Elokim is also emes. The mashal is not fake. The mashal is real. So the Hester is a real Hester. But what is it? Taka, if you work through your struggle and you come out on the other side, then you can go back. What did Yosef HaTzadik tell his brothers? Don't get upset that you sold me. Why? Why? 22 years separated from his father. What do you mean don't get upset? What does he answer? Ki lemichya shlachani Elokim lefnechem. Atem loy mechartem moisi ki Hashem shlachtem moisi. So now I want to ask you a question. If somebody gets kidnapped, physically, emotionally, gets sold as a slave, gets put into prison, right? And you go in to visit them, and you say one thing, oh, it's all good, it's wonderful, you're going to become the Mishnah Lamelech of Mitzrayim. They'll throw you out of the prison. Why? You're completely clueless. You have to be able to empathize with what I'm going through. But Yosef HaTzadik, when he meets his brothers, he says, when I look at the whole story, I see, you didn't kidnap me, you didn't throw me into a pit, you didn't sell me. This was my journey to be able to save the whole world. Difficult journey. So everything was reframed. The same reality was reframed. Now, Yosef was telling this himself all the time. Yosef didn't understand what's happening, but he understood that something is happening. Later, he saw what's happening. That's why he never despaired. So it's the same reality, but what do you see? From one perspective, you just see concealment, darkness, 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 darkness. And from my perspective, it's real. Right? They say sometimes you feel like you have been buried. Somebody has literally buried you. In truth, you weren't buried, you were planted. It's very deep. Right? You weren't buried, you were planted. You were buried! Yeah, you were buried, but you were planted. When you plant a tree, you bury the seed. But you're not burying the seed, you're planting the seed. But if I feel buried, not planted. More sand, more sand, more sand, more sand. You know the mimer they say about the donkey? It's a very cute story. There was a fellow, and his donkey fell deep into a pit. And it hurt its legs, and it was an old donkey, and so he thought to himself, he doesn't have the kalim to schlep out the donkey, he doesn't have help. So you know what, he'll just bury it. So he poured sand, more sand, more sand, more sand, more sand. He felt bad, you know, alte chamoir, like Bilam's chamoir said, you know, this is how you treat me. But he's old, and the donkey is old, trying to use gadal v'yis kadash. He puts the last shovel of sand, he goes away, and suddenly a few minutes later he sees the chamoir is da, the donkey is da. The donkey, they say donkeys are stupid, but sometimes they're not so stupid upon him. Chamoir meloshen chaymer, the Maral says. So what did the donkey do? Every time he poured sand on the donkey shook off the sand, you know, it's snari meyofer kumi, and then went on top of the sand, and every time he poured, shook off the sand, and the sand became another step, another step, another step, until it came out. So was the donkey buried, or the donkey was given an opportunity to come out? It's a very sensitive question. Both realities are very real from the perspective of each side. From the one experiencing it, this is bad, this is very bad, this is dark. But the very same reality could be perceived completely in a different way. And that is, your very, very struggle is just a heichitza. It's an opportunity for unprecedented growth. Not that the reality is fake, but what the meaning of the reality is completely different. So the Rebbe says in this mimer, that's true about Hashem Elokim, that the Hester is a Hester. But from Hashem's perspective, it's just that there should be able to be a different type of Gili Elokus, Nesava Kadosh Baruch Hu Lislei Did It B'Tachtonim. So B'Meila, the concealment is not a concealment which is a real darkness in which I'm not present. The whole reason there's a Yeshes, so there should be able to be a real relationship, a real connection. There can't be a real connection. Ein Melech B'Lo Yam. If there's only me, there's no relationship. Ein Sof is Ein Sof. Okay, we'll continue more next time with more hasbara. Everybody have a beautiful day. The next year will be Thursday morning, 7:45 a.m. Be'ezer Hashem. Pleasure to have you. Pleasure to have you, Rabbi Sharon.